It's Tuesday, 6/14/22. That would be June 14th, 2022. There is an extreme heat warning in effect in our weather forecast. I guess I could also say there is an extreme hot take warning coming up when it comes to the show. How's that for a segue? That means it's time for the Knee Jerks podcast with Vino and Big Al. I am the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. That would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog, and he runs the Knee Jerks Twitter, and he does all sorts of fun things, including traveling to Florida. Actually, we were both in Florida last week. We'll talk about that. Greg, how's things? And I hope you got a tan.
Thanks, Big Al. Good to be here as we start season number 14, believe it or not.
Don't remind me. Like I said, I didn't have gray hair when we started, and so. Oh my God, we're getting old. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, we're doing that. Number 14 starts tonight officially. I am Greg Eno for my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and check me out on my WordPress blog, as I mentioned, every Monday, pretty much. I had a piece yesterday about football players. I think you're going to start to see a lot more football players retire from the NFL in their 20s. I just have this feeling that it's coming, and it's not just based on the two Lions players who retired last week. It's just, to me, I just feel like there is a growing awareness that it's just, the game is just not worth it to some of these players in terms of what could. And we're talking about young players, Al Penasini and Waller, who did not make a lot of money. We're not talking about
they before NIL came into effect, which could even change the game even
right. So it's not necessarily about, well, they got their money and they're gonna
right.
He's decided that no, I don't know necessarily what I want to do with my life. I just know that I don't want to be spending it playing football. So that's
I don't want to end up like I don't want to end up like Mike Webster or someone like that.
Right.
So,
Exactly. So, and with all the Dave Dorson and Junior Seau and those tragic
exactly.
But anyways, there's that.
Well, and be a downer, Greg, to start the show. Good Lord, we have this great guest on, and we have a wonderful old friend come on the show, and now I'm all bummed. Thank you.
Sorry. The hot take warning. The hot take warning was for our guest to start season 14, Mr. Bob Page. A former New York and Detroit sportscaster who's now retired down in Florida, and ironically is going to be speaking to us from a hotel room in Knoxville. I was under the impression he was on the road, and he's I'm not on the road, but I am.
You aren't wrong, Greg. I thought the same thing. I thought he was actually driving when he told us that. So.
Right. So
yes.
Anyways,
but he is old and things like that, so you got to give him a little slack.
Bob's with us tonight. He's you can see he's very active on Twitter, by the way. Go to @BobPageSports, and he's very active on Twitter and loves to engage people there. So that's a lot of fun, especially since folks who miss him doing the No Filter Sports podcast can at least get some taste of him on Twitter. So we'll do that a little bit with. We'll talk lots of Tigers tonight. It's all bad, unfortunately. Wish we get better news for you, but we don't. But before we get to any of that, we're going to play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive Spirograph.
Not a light bright? Spirograph instead.
It was either that or Battleship. But I picked.
Oh, gee. Well, actually, I do have a Battleship game here, so thank goodness I wouldn't want to duplicate it. So
we want a second one. This person now made his name in the world of baseball. He was born on this date in 1926. He passed away in 2019. I will tell you that I will tell you that he was a pitcher, because that's not going to give it away in and of itself. But he was a pitcher in predominantly in the 50s, and he was the first pitcher. And I didn't know this until I looked it up. He was the first pitcher to win, believe it or not, the Rookie of the Year, the MVP, and the Cy Young during the course of his career. Now, that's your first clue.
Wow. All right, born in, you said 1929. So, and mostly known for pitching in the 50s. He's won the Cy Young, MVP, and Rookie of the Year.
Yes.
Huh. Good. And that's the thing. The Cy Young is relatively, it's not. It's a more recent award than the MVP, if I remember right, too. So,
well, you know what? I think
yeah.
when he won it, by the way, it was before they used to only give one Cy Young award.
That's it, for the entire all of baseball, NL and
I think
AL.
he won it. I think he won it when they were still doing that. So that's even more impressive.
Exactly. Yeah.
He won it in 1956.
56.
Which, and you're right. He actually won the first ever Cy Young award in 1956.
Yeah, that's why I remember it's a more recent award than MVP, for example. So, and here you are giving dates. By trying to just give this to me, and I'm trying to think, who the hell could this be? The Cy Young in 1956. And he was born in the he was born in he would have been well into
he was also the National League MVP in that year in 56.
Yeah. God, I got to think of guys from that era. I'll just throw it out there. I'll say Warren Spahn.
No, it's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's the same year. I got to think some more. I wasn't sure if it was, but we were going to throw it out there. So.
Well, hey. We'll get a little easier next week.
I wanted that spirograph so much.
One more shot. One more shot.
All right. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to my one more shot in a little bit. But Greg, why don't you? We're going to talk to one of our one of the guys on that short list of very good friends of the show who have been appearing on the show since almost the beginning.
Right. Exactly. And again, like I mentioned at the top of the program, we're kicking off season 14. And we're going to play for you now a pre-recorded interview we did with Mr. Bob Page. And let's play that for you right now.
As always, Bob is he's when it comes to sports, I think he's lived several lifetimes. It feels like with all the he was on TV, he was on radio, he was in Detroit and New York, and he's done so. He was in locker rooms that. With legendary Hall of Fame level players, and then he even managed to make himself relevant in the podcast era. I mean, it's really amazing some of the stuff Bob's done over the years.
Yeah, and I thought it was he was really candid about his feelings about ending the podcast, and
it sounds like he really loved doing it. He loved doing it.
So. Yeah, and he was kind of. Waxy melancholy there a little bit about the look back at his career in general. But you're right, he did do a lot, and we're always so happy to have him on the program. So that was good stuff.
All right. Well, with that, Greg, before we get talking about everything that's wrong with the Detroit Tigers, and Bob did touch on some of it during our discussion, why don't you get to question 2 of the birthday game?
Okay, born in 1926, he won the National League MVP and the Cy Young in the same season, which was 1956. He had also, previous to that, won the Rookie of the Year award, and he was pitched for the Dodgers. I will tell you that, and he was the first black pitcher to win 20 games in a season.
You know what? I was going to for some reason I was thinking of this name, and I wasn't sure. I take it you're talking about Don Newcombe.
Well, we're talking about Don Newcombe, absolutely.
Because honestly, that was going to be my first guess, but I didn't go with my gut. God damn it!
I did not realize how decorated of a career Don Newcombe had. I mean, I mean, Rookie of the Year, MVP, Cy Young. I mean, that's that doesn't happen very often. And he was a stalwart in those Dodgers teams that were constantly playing the Yankees in the World Series. And they finally did beat them in 55. But Newcombe was outstanding. And he's also a good hitting pitcher. He had a career batting average of 271. And he was also used as a pinch hitter sometimes by Walt Alston. That's how good he was as a hitter. So, Don Newcombe, good stuff. So you will indeed get the spirograph.
Oh, boy. I can picture the ads from TV when I was a wee lad. Of use. Actually, I had a spirograph when I was a wee lad. So,
Didn't we all?
All right, you better overnight that, Greg, just to be on the safe side.
Right. Right.
All right. With that, let's start talking some Detroit Tigers baseball. There's a fair amount to cover because we really haven't had much chance to talk about the Tigers, Greg, because last week it was all about the interviews that we had with City Hall and Ray Scott. So. since we last spoke, the Tigers aren't historically bad, at least record-wise. They've turned it around a little bit, mostly thanks to some pretty good starting pitching, which is very patchwork right now. We'll get into that. And the bullpen has been shockingly good, even though it's starting to show a little wear and tear at the seams, like we saw at the loss last night against Chicago. But, Greg, this offense, the Tigers currently 12 games under 500 going into tonight. They're actually playing right now as we're talking. It's they're 24-36. And as we kind of touched on when we talked to Bob, their offense is historically bad at this point.
Oh.
I mean, when you look at the numbers, when you break them down, the Tigers as a team are slashing or hitting quote unquote. They're hitting 220. Have a 220 average. Their on base percentage is 278, and they're slugging 319. Their team OPS of 597 and under 600 OPS as a team. They just went 8 games without a home run. That streak was finally broken by Willie Castro in their loss last night. He had a home run in the first inning, but the lack of power on this team is absolutely shocking because they are guys who have home run power on this team. They are the lowest scoring team in baseball, and it's not even close. They're averaging 2.78 runs per game. The current league average is 4.3. And I believe it's like almost a half. They're almost a half a run worse than I think the next closest team.
Right.
Since World War II, Greg, there have only been 7 teams to score less than 3 runs per game in a season, and there's been none since the DH. That would be 1972. Mm-hmm. It has been 50 years since any team has averaged fewer than 3 runs a game. So here we are. Hitting Harold Castro, Greg, if you can believe it, has been the Tigers' offensive leader. Right. If Harold Castro is your best offensive player, you are up shit creek. And Harold Castro is actually I'm not a fan. He's on a good team. He's your 24th or 25th player because he's not very good defensively. He's like one of those jack of all trades kind of players. But he's got a 766 OPS, and his OPS plus is 120, and league average is set at about 100. So he's been an above average hitter with the Tigers. He's about the only one other than Miguel Cabrera. Cabrera has been league average at around 104 OPS plus. He's not hitting for any power at all, but he is getting on base, hitting 289. He has a 328 on base percentage. So at least he's not a black hole at the DH, which we were afraid was going to happen. The problem here, Greg, there are regulars: Torkelson, Grossman, Barnhart, Candelario, Scope, and Baez. We'll get into that. They all have OPS under 600. Actually, Scope and Baez, I believe, are way down there, like put well into low 5s. Their OPS plus under 70. I mean, OPS, league average OPS plus, which essentially is weighted OPS compared to the rest of the league and put it in park factors, as 100. Those guys are under 70. That is like a bunch of guys who shouldn't even be in big league baseball.
Well, they're essentially negative WAR guys.
Negative value, exactly. Yeah, a good way to put it. Obviously, we're expecting to see Riley Green soon, Greg, but that's too much pressure to put it on. The fan base is going to consider him the savior, and you can't do that to this kid. But that's what's going to happen.
Right.
But as I mentioned, Bob, we have a very pissed off fan base. It feels like they were sold a bill of goods.
Yeah.
They're going to want a pound of flesh. So how long, so there's going to be scapegoats. It's just a matter of who it is. Will it be some players? Will it be hitting coaches? I can't remember his name right now. I think I tried to wait. Cool Ball, thank you. Or the GM, or who knows who. As long as we know it won't be Javi Baez because he's making too much money, and it won't be Chris Ilitch. So I don't know where to go with this, Greg, because there's no way they can be this bad for the entire season. But you would think that they would have turned it around somewhat by now. And we have guys here who have track records, of being above average major league ball players. Yet here we are, where these guys are hitting. These guys wouldn't be hitting in AAA right now with these numbers. I don't know where to go with this.
it's been so it's not it's just it's been not only bad, it's been surreal almost how bad it's been.
Yes.
Because nobody really well, I'm sure there were some naysayers that are will tell you, oh, I saw it coming, but I don't think anybody saw this coming. We there
Yeah,
may be
there is regression, but this is beyond regression.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
really is.
I'm sure there were some folks that said, time out. Let's slow down a little bit, and maybe they looked at this team and saw another 75, 76 win season, and that's fair.
Yeah.
But I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody thought that they were going to get to that 75, 76 win mark with this kind of an offense. You mentioned the pound of flesh thing, and Bob said it in the interview. He said he thinks that Al Avila will be fired at the second half of the season. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I do know is that this is a litmus test now for
Mhm.
Chris Ilitch because,
Yes, definitely.
as you know, the
Mhm.
Tigers, even under Mike Ilitch, were not really ones to fire anybody in the middle of the season. Now Dave Dombrowski did do it early in his first year. He fired Phil Garner and Randy Smith on the same day. I think
Right.
after they were 0-6 or something. They did real
Yep.
early.
Right.
They did fire Buddy Bell toward the end of the 98 season, but that was because Buddy
Mhm.
and Randy Smith had a disagreement about whether Buddy would be back in 99. Buddy wanted to be told yes or no, am I coming back? And Randy Smith wasn't willing to give him that assurance. So Buddy, it
Right.
was kind of like Buddy quit / he was fired kind of a deal.
Mhm.
And they did fire, of course, Dombrowski in 2015, which we didn't necessarily see coming. So there's a little bit of precedent, but none that involve Chris Ilitch.
No,
None.
because this is normally a very conservative
Yeah,
franchise in personnel matters. Always has been.
right. And Chris Ilitch, it doesn't strike me as a guy who would do that, pull the trigger on the GM in the middle of the season. I just don't think that's going to happen. So,
Mhm.
having said all that, though, and I had written a column back in the fall after they signed Rodriguez and they signed, of course, Javi, and they signed or not signed, but traded for Barnhart. And I said, okay, everybody stand down, all you Avila
Mhm.
haters, because they've addressed the starting pitching, they've addressed shortstop, even though I know it wasn't the guy you wanted, but and they addressed catcher.
Right.
And so I said, look, okay, everybody should kind of cool it a little bit. Well, as illustrated at the top of the discussion, everybody has gone down the tubes. Rodriguez is not even with the team now because of personal issues. Javi is doing Javi things, but to the nth degree at the plate.
Yeah.
Barnhart is maybe he's providing good defense, but I don't think it's enough to cover what
Not
he's
to
doing.
overcome the offense. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden, and then of course they've now, in fairness, they have been hit hard by injuries. That's true, but also in fairness, it's also fair to say, okay, look, after the 6 or 7 year, depending on where you want to start the timeline, rebuild. If this is what there is to show for it, then it's fair. Now I'm letting, like I said in the interview with Bob, I'm letting
Yeah.
the hounds loose now. You can go after Avila
Mhm.
all you want. That's fair. He's fair game now because
Right.
if this is the result of all of the drafting and the development and they bring up this kid Cody Clemens. He goes 0 for a
Mhm.
million. He goes 0 for a million out of the gate. And you
Right.
said something too, by the way. You mentioned Green and you said that it's not fair to put this kind of pressure on this kid, and you said it's going to happen anyway. And that was another. We talked about this club when we talked about this
Mhm.
team, like in spring training, for example, and we said, look,
Right.
the nice thing we said at the time, the nice thing about Green and Torkelson, when it was apparent they were both going to make the team out of spring training, we said, look, the nice thing about this is that because there's all these professional hitters around them. And that was even
Mhm.
before they acquired Austin Meadows. And that's another thing
Right.
that went weird. Austin Meadows had vertigo. I mean, anything that could go
Yep.
wrong went wrong. So
Yes. Yes.
we said, okay, the nice thing about Green and Torkelson making the team at this stage is that they have some guys in the lineup, Scope and Baez and Cabrera and Grossman and
Mhm.
Tall, who are going to take that pressure off these kids. Well, lo and behold, that is exactly not what has happened. And in almost like it's almost cruel irony that it is these kids now that have been maybe not so much Torkelson because I think there's been a little bit more hype about Green, and maybe part of that is because he got hurt and he wasn't able to
Mhm.
make his debut when Torkelson did. But indeed, now this is exactly what we said wasn't going to happen, is happening, which is putting on all this pressure. Riley Green now in a twisted a plot twist is now going to be looked at as being like the savior. Not that this team's going anywhere, but I mean, he's going to be the one that people are going to look to provide some punch. And that's not the way it was supposed to work out. It was supposed to be that he was going to come in, start the season with Torkelson. They would grow together. They take their lumps while everybody else was doing their thing, and you almost wouldn't notice it as much. But now they're going to bring Green in to this mess and essentially expect this kid to be a Babe Ruth out of the. And you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. And he's going to go 1 for 16 in his first 16 at bats, and everybody's going to. It's really a shame that it. But hey, this is a tough game, and that's what they signed up for, these kids. Yeah. But it just wasn't supposed to work out this way.
Right. Yes. It's and I know I see it on social media. I'm sure you have as well. The fan base are starting to scream, "Why don't they fire the hitting coach? Fire Coolball."
Yeah.
And the thing is, we used to hear the same thing about legendary Lloyd McClendon, for example.
Yeah,
or
right.
They want someone to pay for their pain, so to speak. But the thing is,
sure.
See, even if they do fire Coolball, and I'm sure AJ Hinch would have a lot to say about that. And the other thing to remember, Coolball was their hitting coach when they were overachieving offensively last year. Right. So I don't think he became a bad coach overnight. But even if they do fire him, it's not going to change anything. You can't change stuff like this in the middle of a season. They're going to have to wait. You don't make major swing changes and try to figure crap out like this until the offseason. And I wish fans understood that. Okay, they fire him. Okay, maybe they make Mike Hessman instead the assistant, make him the hitting coach. Nothing's going to change. He's going to have the same similar approach. Right. So that's the thing that I think we have to be aware of, is that fans want someone to pay.
Right.
But when you look at who really needs to pay, who really should be in trouble for all this, is the general manager. If you're going to fire anybody, it's got to be him at this point. It really
Of course. I mean, I mean, the buck has to stop. This is a roster problem. This is not Hinch. It's not even.
Yeah, this is not an approach problem. You're right. Yeah,
right. I mean, you're not going to batting coach your way out of this. This is a way beyond that. And it's mind boggling. And I know that, again, there is some stuff that happened that nobody could have foreseen. I mean, the Meadows with the vertigo and all the injuries to the pitchers. And I'm willing to concede that. That's true. But the other thing that we talked about, Bob, and it was free agency, and like I told you before, there's not a lot of help out there. You're not going to be able to. That's the other scary thing. You're not really going to be able to spend your way out of this. I know the fans think that Chris Ilitch is cheap and he doesn't care about winning and all this, but really, I mean, looking at who's available in the offseason this year and even the offseason after 2023, it's not that impressive. There's not a lot of help to be had by breaking out a checkbook. So that's another scary thing. So you're going to have to either trade your way out of this, which I don't know how you necessarily do that either with so many people right now that are not tradable, or you're just going to have to just extend this rebuild another 3 to 5 years and just start to draft more position players and more bats and hope that some of these guys, like you mentioned at the top of the discussion, will break out of it and start to match their baseball cards. But other than that, there's really that's the other scary thing about this, Al. There's really there's no quick fix here. I mean, there's no, they're not going to be able to go out. There's nobody like Bryce Harper available that they can go get next year. Not that they would anyway, but there's nobody like that available. There's all the good young talent that's out there mashing the baseball right now that you read about every day are all locked up with their respective teams. And you're never gonna pry them loose in a trade. Never. Yeah. So you're pretty much behind the 8 ball here. And I think fans, some of them have caught on to that, but I think some of them still feel like that all Chris Ilitch has to do is whip out a checkbook and start buying players again. But that's not really the way it's going to work.
And that's not how the Tigers built a contender to begin with. Yes, they did spend money. They signed they had some big splash signings, but look at the guys who were the core of that that 2006 to 2016 era, some of the players. Carlos Guillen was a trade. Placido Blanco was traded. Doug Fister acquired by a trade. Miguel Cabrera acquired by a trade.
Yep.
You know, even the guys like Delman Young, acquired via trade. This was, and they were acquired by a trade by trading your prospects, and that's the decision the Tigers have to make, because they fancy themselves a Tampa Bay Rays type organization. We're going to build up with our prospects, and we'll build we won't spend we'll spend what we have to spend, but we really prefer to have this young core, bring them up together.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily work like that. And I think the Rays are an outlier. It shouldn't work down there, but they have such a great front office. It does. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work pretty much anywhere else. It's kind of a fluky thing. And here we are in Detroit. There is a lot of talented arms on this organization, and that's what's kept them from going to like 20 games under 500.
Right, exactly.
Because some of their arms have stepped up in the bullpen and in the rotation.
Right.
Do you start trading some of those surplus arms to find some position players? Because say what you will about, we've talked about drafting with this. We're talking about the building through the draft. They are so overly reliant on pitching that how they went so hard on the pitching. There's Torkelson, who has been a disappointment, but still a rookie, and he's only 2 months into his first season in the bigs. Right. And there's Green. Who else is there? We've been told Darren Dingler. Well, he's still at AAA, hitting like 240. Daz Cameron been as a 4A player. Derek Hill, 4A player.
Yeah.
Anybody who might be a possible big league bat is probably a single A or below and like 2 to 5 years away. So,
right.
This is a very dire situation when you look into it. I mean, the Tigers. It's not like the Tigers are losing 10-8. They're losing 2-0, 5-2.
Right.
3-0, 3-1, things like that. They just aren't. They're pitching well enough to at least play 500 balls.
And they're also winning games 3-2, 3-1.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not when they win. It's always a nail biter.
Yeah.
Because they have to win games 3-2, 4-3, and that's just so hard.
And that's hard on the pitching.
And you hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head. The fact that they're even 24-36 is amazing, given this offense. I mean, in this day and age, if you were to put those numbers that you set forth at the beginning,
dead ball era. That's second dead ball era stuff.
Those are numbers of a pitcher hitting. Okay,
in 1967.
Right. So if you were to say at the beginning of the season, okay, after 60, if you were to say to somebody, okay, after 60 games, this is what the numbers were going to be offensively. How many games do you think that such a team would win? You might say 15-45.
Yeah.
You might go that low, because that's how this game is built on offense, and the fact that they've won 24 games out of 60 is really unbelievable. But back to your question, you said, would you trade surplus arms? Here's the other thing that's working against it, and we touched on it in the Page interview. Is I'm not sure, Al, how much trade value pitchers even have anymore. I really don't.
That's what I brought up with Bob when I mentioned starting pitching has become devalued. It really has.
I mean, pitching in general. I mean, people say, you need pitching and defense to win. I get it, but Tigers aren't the only team out in there in Major League Baseball that has depth with their pitching. There's a lot of teams that have that. And I don't know there's anybody, and frankly, to be honest with you, a lot of these guys, to be brutally honest with you, the pitchers are overachieving. I mean, I don't know that they can keep this up.
Still in small sample size.
Yeah, I don't know that they can keep this up. So I don't know if you're gonna dazzle a GM of another team by dangling some of these names.
Yeah, dangling Alex Faedo, who was 2 years, had Tommy John. This is his first year back after Tommy John 2 years ago.
And you're only Al, even though you mentioned about starting pitching being devalued, and I agree with you, but still, if you're going to get anything back from a team, it's going to be for a starting pitcher. You're not going to trade relievers and cobble together, hitters. I mean, that's just not the way it's going to work. Yeah. Because everybody knows that bullpens and relievers are very mercurial.
fungible. We've been very consistent about how we feel about
They're
that.
good
You're
one
right.
year and bad the next. So
Exactly.
you're not going to dangle Andrew Chafin out there and try to get anything back.
Yeah.
If you're going to trade anybody, it's going to have to be a starter. And the problem with that is all their
Mm-hmm.
starters are injured.
Yeah.
So you can't trade Matt Manning. You can't trade even, you mentioned Faedo. Who knows about him. You can't trade Manning. Rodriguez, of course, is off the team. You can't trade. I'm missing somebody now. There's Manning. Mize. You can't trade Mize.
Well, let me get into this right now. It's a topic here. This is my top. Here's the title of my topic: the perils of building around young starting pitching.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is a term that more people should know.
Yeah.
It was coined in Baseball Prospectus like 7-8 years ago. And as I put it, it's called "There is no such thing as a pitching prospect." TINSTAAPP, and essentially what that statement is, that there's no such thing as pitching prospect, is it's a warning to teams to not overinvest in young pitchers, especially high school pitchers, guys out of high school, due to their high attrition rates. And that is what we are seeing with the Tigers right now. I mean, it took me forever to put some of this stuff together here when I was doing the notes earlier. Talk about learning your lesson the hard way about investing in young pitching and it's very, very risky thing to do. You got Casey Mize. He was the first overall pick in 2018. He's been in the IL since April with that dreaded elbow strain. As soon as you hear elbow strain, Greg, what do you think? Tommy John. Well, That's ultimately what it was. He's getting Tommy John probably next few weeks. And this is, they tried to rehab him, didn't work out. He went back to Lakeland. So this Tommy John surgery means, Greg, this is a guy who was drafted out of college. So he was like 21 when he was drafted. Now this means they're essentially going to lose 2 of his controllable years due to injury. I mean, that's a big deal when people make about, how much you end up paying people and how long you had them under team control before they hit free agency. Yeah. And pitchers, all of a sudden, the Tigers are losing pitchers for 2 years at a time for a lot of these injuries. You got Matt Manning, who you just brought up. He was the first round pick, 9 overall in 2016. His rehab was shut down 2 weeks ago after he finally came clean that his shoulder had major shoulder pain. So he's back on the shelf with tendonitis, and there's no timetable at all for his return. You got Joey Wentz. He was a compensatory between the first and second round pick with the Braves, and he was the centerpiece of the Shane Green trade when the Tigers got rid of him. He was shut down after his second major league start a few weeks ago, and he looked pretty darn good. He has a left shoulder strain. He has no timetable for a return. And it's worth noting as we're talking about injuries. Alex Faedo, who I just mentioned, he missed about 2 years due to his Tommy John. Michael Fulmer, who was a rookie of the year and was for a long time thought to be going to be a top of the line starter. Well, he couldn't hold up physically. He missed almost 2 years due to Tommy John and a serious knee injury. And now he's become a fireman. He's a very good one, but he is what he is at this point, and his career changed because of the arm injury. Then you got Spencer Turnbull, who looked like he was on the verge, Greg, of moving from innings eater, kind of a 4 or 5 starter into a 2 or a 3, maybe even a number 1 kind of starter. He threw that no hitter. Then a few weeks later, he has Tommy John surgery. We probably won't see him till next year. These are all young pitchers. These are all guys who the Tigers have wasted some of their team control on because they invested so heavily in these starting pitchers that, you get 7 years of team control. All of a sudden, you're talking about actually being productive. There may be 4 or 5 if you're lucky. And a lot of these guys, Greg, aren't even going to pan out. I mean, Casey Mize, Scooble looks like he might be the best of all of them. And he was a 9th round pick. You know why he was a 9th round pick? He had Tommy John surgery in college, but Casey Mize was not pitching like he was going to be an ace. He was pitching like a guy who was going to be a 3 or 4 starter because he wasn't missing bats. He wasn't striking guys out. Right. In today's game, you got to strike guys out. Scooble does. Mize doesn't. Manning, the jury's still out on. But Al Avila, for various reasons. I think some of it was just because how the draft fell, and the other was this is how he wanted to build the team. He built it around starting pitching in an era where it's becoming more and more devalued, where guys are going 5 innings and that's it. And as Bob mentioned in the interview, now openers have become more important. We're seeing bullpen days all the time. I think the Tigers are going to have like a couple of bullpen days this week, for example. So I don't. It's an absolute mess. Yes, it's nice that the Tigers have built a staff out of next to nothing that is holding them somewhat afloat, but that doesn't change the fact that you can have some good pitching, and as we're seeing, you're still losing games because you can't score runs, and that puts undue pressure on the pitching staff, and it's going to end up costing them even more in games and in possible injuries later in this season if they continue to stress the staff the way they have.
Well, maybe this is an unfair way to grade and rate general managers because it's maybe it's a little bit too volatile of a way to do it. But when you look back at Avila's run, which is essentially started in I don't know August of 2015, whenever they fired Dombrowski.
Right.
Okay. What you would like to be able to say about your general manager, and you look back at some of the general managers we've seen in Detroit of different sports who've been revered, Jack McCloskey, for example, and Bill Ajoy to a degree, and Dumars early on in his tenure and so forth, and Kenny Holland and so forth. What you'd like to be able to say about your GM is, okay, where were the times where he really kind of hoodwinked another team? Where was the time where you could look at a trade or a signing and say, boy, was he sly like a fox?
Yeah, were they ahead of the curve or something?
Right.
Where
they
make trends instead of follow trends?
Right. And as much as I've tried to defend Avila over the years, because I've always kind of preached patience, I have to admit that I would be hard pressed to come up with more than I don't know if I could come up with any, frankly, where the Tigers have really where they've really fleeced another team during Avila's tenure, where they've really either signed a guy who just, was, boy, talk about bang for your buck, or made a trade with the team where the other team got the short end of the stick. And maybe if I thought hard enough, or maybe one of the listeners would think hard enough, maybe they could come up with something. But even if they could, it's not nearly enough. That's what you have to do. You have to have someone who can do that kind of stuff, who can make, and the flip side of that, Al, if you look at the trades that he has made for some of the heavy hitter, you mentioned Verlander and other folks.
Verlander and Martinez being the two big ones, yeah.
And even guys like Alex Wilson and people like that.
Yeah, Shane Green, guys who definitely had value. They had value.
You look at what he got back. It just doesn't jibe. And and that's really, Al. I mean, there's no other. We have metrics for a lot of other. We have metrics for players. We have, to a degree, we have metrics for managers, of course, which is wins and losses. We have metrics for pitchers and so forth. But really, the only metric we really have for a front office type are these kinds of things I'm talking about. And I just don't see it. I don't see where they've made these brilliant. And I don't see a lot of player development. Certainly not with position players. I don't see a lot of, lopsided trades. I just don't see it, and I just don't know how else to put it, because how else do you? But I just think this, and you could say all you want about some of the stuff was not foreseen, but part of not having things that are foreseen is to have depth and to have guys. Now they've had them. Yes, that's true. They've had in the pitching zero depth with position players. You mentioned Hill, Cameron, and guys like that. 4A players. They got guys like Grossman on the downside of his career. Obviously, the money they spent in Scope looks like that was misspent. Candelario I can't figure him out. The Baez thing, and I think even you, who didn't really want him, are, I don't think even you expected.
I didn't think he'd be this bad. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So I mean, so I don't know. I'm not seeing it. I don't even the I'm just not seeing it.
Well, just to kind of refer to the type of trade you're talking about, who did Dave Dombrowski trade to get Carlos Guillen? It was a Tigers utility man. Yeah, I think he's a coach for him right now.
Santiago or
that's Ramon Santiago.
Yeah,
he traded Ramon Santiago for Carlos Guillen, and he ultimately ended up with Santiago back too.
Right.
Because Santiago became a free agent and re-signed with the Tigers.
Well,
those are the kind of deals that Dave Dombrowski was brilliant at making.
If you can't, a test of a trade is if you can't name the player that was traded for the guy you got back, that's a good trade. Okay. Yeah. Now we came up with Santiago's name. That's true, but most people wouldn't be able to. If you was asked one of the
how did the Tigers get Carlos Guillen? They probably wouldn't be able to tell you. Right.
They may not even be able to tell you how they got Cabrera by this juncture.
Exactly.
Okay? So you have to, when you've got trades like that where you bring people like that in, and you don't even know how you got them. You have no idea who the players were that. Yeah. And that was always the thing with Holland, with the Red Wings, especially those deadline deals.
Right.
You never knew who you didn't know who they traded to get these guys, the Brad Stewarts of the world, and the
who did the Wings give up for Larry Murphy?
Larry Murphy,
Chris Chelios. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember.
And that's what I'm talking about. But everybody could tell you when you trade a kid you trade a kid who ends up being great guns, they'll tell you that. They'll memorize that name until they die.
Everybody remembers that John Smoltz was one of the Tiger. Yeah.
Right. So,
even though I would still make that trade today, but regardless.
Of course.
But I know what you. But you brought up Baez. We really should talk about because we really haven't talked much about him since he was signed, other than he's having issues. Well, when you look at the numbers, he's more than just having issues. It makes you wonder: is this a decline that just hit all of a sudden, like a cliff? Because, he was the Tigers' big free agent signing, other than Rodriguez, who we'll touch on as well. But he was expected to solidify the middle of the batting order along with the middle of the infield. Defensively, he's been fine. No complaints there.
Right. Yeah.
But, you expect he was probably going to be their number 3 or number 5 hitter, maybe 2, somewhere in there. Yeah. But the fear, and this was my fear and a lot of people's fears, when it came to Baez, is that he was 29. Middle infielders very often age badly. Once they get to the really bad side of 30, things happen. They slow down. And the issue with Baez is that he was overly dependent on his bat speed and athleticism. And all the worst things about Baez have come to fruition in that you were terrified of his free swinging, which is to an extreme at this point. He cannot stop swinging at a low and outside breaking ball. Right. He has a high K rate and a low walk weight. Well, those things have just become even worse since he signed with the Tigers. Right now, coming into the night, Greg, he is slashing. He's hitting 193, a 236 on base percentage, and he's slugging, if you can call it slugging, 294. That's a 530 OPS, just 3 home runs, 16 RBI. I kind of started putting this together before our last podcast, and that was 2 weeks ago. He's had 3 RBIs. That's all. I've only had to change that number for the most part in those 2 weeks. He's had 3 RBI. His OPS plus is 54. Again, where I mentioned league average. I mean, just to be a blob, middle of the road, not AAA guy is 100.
Right.
His WAR is dropped below replacement level. His B-WAR, his baseball reference WAR, is negative 0.2. I mean, the only reason it's that high is because of his defense. His defense is at least keeping him afloat. So I'm sure something's going to change. But what scares me about him, Greg, if you see some of the quotes from him, especially after the boo birds have been coming out deservedly, and they're asking, and reporters are asking, well, what are you doing differently? Are you watching video, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I'm just not getting my pitch to hit. I guess he's the type of guy who doesn't watch video, doesn't take notes. He goes up there by feel and just looks for his pitch. That's a recipe for disaster, if you ask me, because this is a guy who probably needs to change his approach and isn't and won't. And
Yeah,
he's just going to keep hitting his head against the wall with this.
he's got to be the easiest. There's everybody. I even see the outfielders now, by the way, carrying these little pieces of paper with them.
Yeah.
Where they check the who's up and where they hit the ball. Baez has got to be one of the easiest, if not the easiest, hitter to game plan for.
Yeah.
I wrote a column about him a couple weeks ago. I said I would fine any of my pitchers who threw him a fastball at any point in the count.
He threw him a strike for that.
Yeah, at any point in the count, I would, even on a 3-0 pitch, I might consider finding a guy who threw a fastball on 3-0, because this whole thing about I'm just waiting for my pitch. You're not going to get your pitch if the book on you. First of all, we all know what the book is. I mean, you don't have to be in the big leagues. You don't have to be a scout. We all know what the book is on him, which is that you mentioned the slider loan away, which I don't know what he sees. I don't know what he sees. I don't know what he sees when he sees that pitch come. I don't know what. I just don't know what he sees to swing at it over and over and over again. It's almost creepy how he doesn't have any sort of ability to differentiate between that pitch that he's seen a million times before.
Yep.
And anything else. And I know that a lot of the fans who watched him play with the Mets and the Cubs, are saying, look, we saw this. This is what he does. This is who he is. But this is to the extreme, and it's almost horrifying to say. I don't know if he's just completely lost it and he's pulling a Nate Colbert, or if this is just something
that's a great. You should expound on that, because that's a great comparison. Because Nate Colbert was a power hitting first baseman of San Diego in the 70s. And, he was a 35 home run a year guy. And when the Tigers got him, he fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And essentially his career was over, if I'm correct.
That's correct. And he was hitting like 140 when the Tigers finally released him, right around this time of the year, actually. He hit like 140 with like 3 home runs or something.
Yeah.
And it was just getting worse and worse. Ralph Houck, he tried to play. It's tough for a manager, because on the one hand you want to see if the guy's going to kind of break out of it, but then it comes a point where you just can't play him anymore. And so the thing about Colbert, which I didn't know until later, was that he had suffered and he didn't tell the Tigers, by the way, he had suffered a back injury. If you look at his last year in San Diego, which was 74, it was not a good year. That's one of the reasons why the Tigers got him on the cheap, essentially on the cheap, was because he was bad in San Diego in 74. And so the Tigers got him coming off a down year. So Jim Campbell thought, well, that he's got a track record. He had a bad year. Maybe we can change leagues, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out that he had a back injury that he was hiding even from the Padres, and he hid it from the Tigers. And that later on came out that was one of the reasons why, even when he hit the ball, it wasn't going anywhere. So, but that wasn't a free agency sign. That was a trade, but still.
That was a trade, right. And he was essentially out of baseball
the next year.
2 years.
Yeah.
But he played like 16 games in 76. Yeah, I just looked up the numbers. The Tigers washed their hands of him after 45 games. That is, and he was a splash trade for them. He was supposed to be a big deal.
I remember when I was a kid and they got him, I was very excited because I knew
I
followed him from afar. He hit 5 home runs in a doubleheader one time for the Padres.
That's right. Yeah.
And he was this big hulking first baseman. The Tigers had just gotten rid of Norm Cash, and they needed a first baseman and a bat, but he fell off the cliff.
But because of injury, but we didn't know. But which brings the question: maybe there's something else wrong with Baez that we don't know.
Well, it may not even be necessarily an injury, Al. It could just be a mental thing that
you're right. Changing league, changing teams. Who I don't know.
And I know there's the pressure of I want to be the guy.
And the big money and all that. Yeah,
I understand that. I get nobody else is hitting, so you want to be the guy. I get it. But you're right. You hit the nail on the head, by the way. And that's one of the things I mentioned in my column too, which was this whole approach thing, and not watching video, and didn't seem like he was very open or very receptive to any sort of help. And I remember one of the reasons I wrote the column was that I was concerned that nobody in the Tigers on the coaching staff seemed to really either want to work with him, and it was kind of like they were just throwing their hands up. Well, that's who he is, and maybe they don't want to work with him because he doesn't want to be worked with, and that's that's kind of
that's the logical conclusion. Exactly.
And to be paid that kind of money and to come if you're feel pressure because you want to deliver and live up to your contract, then aren't you going to want to try anything you can to make the situation better instead of just saying
this is like an all-star level player who is literally embarrassing himself, and you would think he would do whatever it took to stop embarrassing himself, because it just brings to mind, remember when JD Martinez was he was a prize prospect with the Astros. They gave up on him, sent him to the minor leagues, and the Tigers picked him up as a minor league free agent. And it turned out he became a student of hitting, completely changed his approach, took notes, watched video, and then and he turned himself into an MVP candidate just on his bat alone. That's the kind of thing you would like to see a player do.
I tell you what, I have not seen a player hit the ball as hard as JD Martinez hits it in a long time. I'm not, he may not always get a hit, but he hits he hits the ball so hard. It's almost mind-boggling how hard he hits the baseball.
He was on his way to washing down a baseball.
Oh, now and Baez looks like he's 39 instead of 20. You think he's like he's at the last year of his career, and he's this old, washed up 39-year-old. Really, that's what he looks like. And
right. I would have expecting to see this out of Cabrera, not Baez, to be honest. And Cabrera's has been at least respectable.
Sure.
I'm at a loss at this point, but I think you make a great point. From all that we're hearing, he doesn't want to change, and if a player doesn't want to change, the coaching staff can't make it. It's got to be a two-way street. You're right about that.
Right.
And apparently it isn't right now. And
I all of a sudden I can't hear you. You're muted. Maybe you muted yourself up.
I hit the wrong button. I was waving my hands around and I hit the wrong button. I said Baez got 6 years, $130 million, 2-year buyout. Eduardo Rodriguez was the other splash signing this past offseason. He got 5 years, 77. I believe he's got a 2-year buyout as well. And he was one of those analytical signings because his traditional stats are on the high side, but if you looked at things like at FIP and things like some of the more arcane analytical numbers said he was better than his traditional stats. And he looked like he was starting to come around, and then he got hurt, strained rib cage. Apparently he had a very nice start in Toledo, looked like he was ready to come back. And we got a shocking announcement from the Tigers yesterday. I don't think anybody. Apparently, the Tigers knew this was coming because some cryptic comments made by Hinch yesterday.
Right.
But this is also yesterday afternoon. We get this a very short release from the Tigers. Eduardo Rodriguez has informed the club that due to personal matters, he will not rejoin the team at this time. As a result, Eduardo has been placed on a restricted list until further notice. And then when Hinch was asked about it, he says, "We knew about this. We've known about this. We knew it was going to happen. I don't know if and I think he said something to the effect, I don't know when or if he's coming back."
Right.
Which that's a red flag right there.
Right.
What the hell is going on with this guy? I mean, because he is costing himself $75,000 a day in salary. Because being placed on the restricted list, that means he's off the 40-man roster, so the Tigers can replace him. He gets no service time accrued, and he does not get paid, as I just mentioned. I mean, this is a big deal. Because usually, if there's an issue, it's like there's a bereavement list, there's the injured list. No, there's a few other lists where is this not as severe as this? This is like we're taking this guy off the roster completely, we're wiping away his contract temporarily, and we don't know what's going to happen here. So immediately, and it came out today that I believe John Heyman reported that he's having marital troubles. Which is interesting because if you looked online yesterday, there were internet sleuths out there on Twitter who went into his Instagram and noticed that all pictures of his wife had been wiped from his Instagram.
Oh, boy.
And so in the post said today, it's because he's having marital issues. And I will say this, as someone who has been through a divorce, it knocks you for an absolute mental loop. I've always said this, Greg, if you go through a divorce, you should be considered mentally incompetent for a year, because it really knocks you completely off your moorings. Especially if you're not the one who files for it. Like in my case, I wasn't the filer. I was cheated on. But thing is, though, I still had to work. I still had to muddle through my life, as fucked up as it was at the time, and it was awful.
Right.
It took me a couple years to really get straight.
Yeah.
And I was depressed, and it was an awful time for me.
Yeah.
So it says volumes that Rodriguez is waving away. That he's just saying, I got to get away from everything.
Yeah.
And I got to figure things out, and I got to take care of it. And that's a scary thought, that he's willing to walk away from $75,000 a day because he's probably so mentally screwed up right now because of what's going on in his personal life. So I'm not going to get on his case about it. No, I hope he's able to figure things out, because I've been there. But it's just another sign that the Tigers are cursed this year, because this is not anything you can predict. And you also got to admit, traveling on the road as much as these guys do, and the things that they have to do to be a professional athlete, it's got to take a toll on your personal life. And to try and straighten out your personal life while you're on the road for 2 weeks at a time, across the country or in Canada or whatever, that's got to be hard. So I can understand why he asked for the time off. I just feel for the guy. I really do. The Tigers, whatever. The season's over. I feel for Rodriguez. I just hope he's able to get his life straightened out, because he's a legitimate big league pitcher. But that's not even important right now. What's important that he gets his life straightened out. I hope nothing bad happens.
Well, I really hope that the more fans than not take that same attitude that you're taking, even if they don't have the history that you have. I mean, I would hope that even folks who've never been divorced, would take that tack with him, because a lot of times, too many times, fans think that because you're making all this money, that you're just like a machine.
Everything's perfect.
It doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life. You ought to go out there and perform, come hell or high water. When in fact, even if you're making $60,000 a year in an office, if you're going through a divorce or something of that nature, it's gonna, it's true, you may not be able to walk away from your job unless you can take some sort of there's some companies have, you can take leaves and so forth for mental health. That's true. But but it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter really where you work or what kind of money you're making. If you are going through something like that, it's going to mess you up. So I hope that a lot of folks will take, and frankly, Al, with this, the way this year's gone, I don't know. I think the fans just look at this as just another bad thing that's happened, and the Tigers are not competing for anything right now. So it's not like he's their star pitcher, who they're in the first place, and now he's leaving because he's got issues with his marriage. I think this is just going to get lost in the shuffle of all the bad stuff that happened. I think it's just another pox on this season. This really, and you and I have been following this team for 50 years.
Yeah.
This might be, this might be the weirdest season I've ever seen. Not so much in terms of the wins and losses. I'm just talking in terms of everything that's happened. And you throw this Rodriguez thing into the mix. It's almost like it had to happen in this year. This was the year that something like that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's we've seen some weird seasons in our lifetime of following Detroit sports, but I think you're up there. This is way up there. As I did not. This is I never saw any of this. This is blindsided me as a fan. That the season was over in April. It really was. Even though I see fans out there. Well, they can play. They can turn it around. No, because they have to play like 600 ball the rest of the season. Even I think I saw that for them to get back to 500 by the end of the year, they got to play 560 ball. They aren't playing 560 ball. They are not playing 500 ball right now. Not with this offense. Not with the injuries. No, not with the way this team is constructed. And Rodriguez going through a personal crisis is just kind of like a cherry on the top of what's been a shit sandwich of a year. And there's not much more to say about it. And the thing is, I think Rodriguez will ultimately be a good signing because he is a legit big league pitcher, and even if he doesn't end up being a top of the rotation guy, he's going to be a guy who will go out there every 5 days once he gets his head on straight, and give you 6-7 innings, which is still even though starting pitchers has been devalued, you need guys like him. You really do, but. I don't know. Between like Rodriguez going through this, you had Pineda breaking his finger, and he's been out for like a month. You have all these arm injuries. It's
here's another
Daz
question.
Cameron's on the COVID list, for Christ's sake. Yeah. I don't know.
Here's another question that is already starting to get asked a little bit on social media, and that is what do you think this whole dynamic now, or what do you want to call it, with the Tigers? How do you think that this affects AJ Hinch's wanting to stay here?
I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because right now this team does not look like they're going to be able to compete next year.
Right.
With these pitching injuries, for example. Right. And as we said, the bullpen has been good this year so far.
Yeah. But it could be lousy next
year. They go the other direction next year.
Right. Or it could go the other direction after the All-Star break. Yeah.
Exactly. So if I'm Hinch, and the thing is, I see a lot of fans starting to turn on Hinch a little bit. I'm seeing he thought he cheated in Houston. That kind of crap. Or he's overrated. Most of the stuff that's going on here, I'm not going to blame him for it. He didn't tell Jonathan Scope and say, I want you to forget how to hit the ball. That's the thing. Fans overrate the day-to-day on-field stuff that a manager has control of. We've talked about this in the past. We came to Jim Leland. Even remember back then, fans would rag about him, about his lineups and things like that. Even I would fall into it occasionally. But the thing is, the manager's main job, and it goes with like some of the best coaches we've seen in this town, going back to say Chuck Daly. Their main job was running a good, clean, happy clubhouse, keeping things under control, not letting bad stuff fester, nipping stuff in the bud, and putting players in a position to take the field and then to do their jobs to the best of their ability. Because when you look, I think the research has been done. On-field results by a manager, he might win you 2 or 3 more games a year if he makes all the right decisions. He's not going to change your record from under 500 to 20 games over. It doesn't work that way. It's on the players and it's on the GM for putting the roster together. The manager's job is essentially running the clubhouse and keeping things under control and keeping things happy. Hitchens, I think, has been pretty good at that. The question is, I think he thought this team was going to be farther ahead than it actually is, because he came from a very say what you will about the cheating scandal. Astros were a winning, well-run organization, if a bit misogynist and kind of a shit show in some ways. But the baseball operations part of it is solid, still is. I mean, they're still competitive to this day. So yeah, if I'm the Tigers and I want to keep Hinch, you got to start appeasing him in some way. And I think in some of that is you have to start figuring shit out with your roster when it comes to giving him some position players that can hit. I mean, I thought Austin Meadows was going to be better. He's probably still will be. No one saw him getting sick and with the vertigo, but the concerning ones, are the Baezes and the Scopes, the guys who are on that edge of falling out of their primes and maybe hitting their decline years. That's stuff I'm worried about. And then you got guys like Candelario, Greg. He's coming into his contract years where he's going to be enter free agency. This was supposed to be his big year. Where he was going to set himself up to make big money. Now the question is, do you even keep him at this point? Is he going to be worth the money he's asking? Because the way he's performed this year, the answer is no. All of a sudden, this team looked like going back last September, we were all, this could be, things are looking up. Now all of a sudden it feels like instead of they have been taking a step forward, they've taken 20 steps backwards, and Hinch has seen it, and he's got to be wondering about his future because he doesn't want to go down with a sinking ship. He doesn't want his reputation ruined by what's going on with this roster issues here in Detroit. And he is good enough and has a track record. He could land on his feet with a far, far, far better team. And the Tigers should definitely be concerned about that.
Yeah, right. And that's just been kind of, there's been so much bad going on that there really hasn't been a lot of.
And don't forget Chris Fetter. He's the mastermind behind the pitching.
There hasn't been a lot.
Oh my God! They have to keep him.
So I know some fans are already, and they should be, getting a little nervous about Hinch. And you mentioned turning against Hinch. I'm talking about the fans who like Hinch, who actually like Hinch, but are scared that he's going to opt out of his contract and go somewhere else.
Would you blame him?
No, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that kind of a thing hasn't really gotten a lot of traction yet. But I think it's going to
give it time.
Right. The further we get into the season,
I
think, and whether or not anybody, one of these clowns in Detroit journalism will ever write an article about it, I don't know. Whether they write about it or not, that's going to be asked about, is whether or not Hinch is willing to stick it out. Now, in fairness, I mean, he did come here. It wasn't like they dragged him, kicking and screaming. He did come here. He was recruited almost immediately as soon as he was available, and he did come here on his own volition. Okay, so he knew, he knew what he was getting himself.
Especially everybody thought he was going to Chicago at the time.
Right. Well, frankly, Al,
and that's turned into a shit show as well. So
frankly, I'm sure he would have wanted to go to Chicago. The only reason he didn't is because the owner was infatuated with Tony
Reinsdorf wanted La Russa, and that's gone to hell in a handbasket over.
Had that whole La Russa thing not happened, he'd be in Chicago right now. I'm convinced of that.
Right now,
I think the Tigers were there. He did come here. That's true, but I think the Tigers were not his number one pick, despite
I'm with you there.
Despite his, having been a former player and so forth. I think he would have.
He wanted a job because out of sight, out of mind.
He even said, he admitted it. If you go back to some of the clippings from when the Tigers signed him, he admitted it. He said, "I thought I was going to Chicago," and he said it. But then the whole La Russa thing happened, and Hinch would have been a much better fit, frankly, in Chicago than in Detroit. But, he did want to manage very badly. He wasn't sure, to be honest, how many more offers he would get, having just come off the suspension. So he took, he was smart. He said, well, I want to manage. Maybe I would have rather been in Chicago, but this is still this is still a very storied franchise. I used to play here. Maybe there is enough talent here. We got the Green and Torkelson thing coming. Maybe this is before all the injuries now. This is before Mize got hurt, before Turnbull got hurt, before all this stuff happened. So I can see why he would look at the roster and say, maybe this is something that I get. Maybe he wanted to manage Miguel Cabrera. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Maybe this was something that he decided, I can. This may not be my first choice, but this isn't bad. But now, 2 years into it, I like you said, I can't blame him. If he were to say, "Look, guys, I'm out," and then where's that going to leave the Tigers? I don't know. Because you mentioned if Fetter's not staying, if Hinch goes, there's no question about that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God, Greg! What the hell happened this year? All right. With that, I think we're about running out of time. I'm sure Greg's got a cold cocktail waiting for him soon, and honestly, I got a podcast to edit now, so. As we wrap things up, like I said, our next show will have a bit more. We'll probably have a few more things to talk about because NBA draft. Well, the playoffs will be over for finally. I would hope, at least for the NBA. Yeah, can you believe, Greg, that if the NHL Stanley Cup Finals go 7 games, they will be playing till June 28th?
Really?
Isn't that bonkers?
Wow.
Hockey season should be over. Hell, basketball season should be over. But here we are.
Did they take a break? Didn't they take a break because they didn't have an Olympic break even though they weren't in the Olympics? Didn't they still have that break?
I think they squeezed a few games in there, but it was kind of stretched out a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's
it is late.
Hockey in late June. Well, and they hadn't even started the finals yet. The finals start tomorrow. The Cup finals. So At least the hockey has. At least I'll say this: the hockey has been enjoyable, very much. So I actually started getting kind of caught up with the Lightning because I spent last week in Tampa, near Tampa. My dad's a huge Rays fan, so I watched a lot of Tampa Bay Rays baseball, and I watched a lot of Tampa Bay Lightning hockey. So I won't say I've become a fan, but at least I have a vested interest in my dad staying happy. I'll put it that way. Anyway, with that, now they got that rant out of the way. Why don't we get our jerks of the week out of the way so we can call the podcast? Who's your jerk of the week?
Well, these coaches and athletes who open their mouths about politics, I don't know why they do it. This goes for people who I agree with politically.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why anyone who when you're better off being apolitical and nobody knows your political views, whether you're a business owner, which I don't understand why some businesses, especially small businesses, will put their political leanings on their sleeve, automatically alienating half their client base. I don't know why you do that. Anyway, Jack Del Rio, assistant coach for the Washington Commanders, had put out a tweet. He's defensive coordinator. Put out a tweet kind of bemoaning the fact that we're having these hearings about January 6th, and yet nothing was done. This is Del Rio talking. Nothing was done about all the, supposed rioting by the BLM people.
Yeah, January 6th was a dust-up.
Well, that's what I'm getting to. So he puts this tweet out.
Yeah.
Now, he's doing this immediate. He's doing a media availability. This is during minicamp, and some reporter asked him about the tweet, which I guess is okay. I mean, even though this was a media availability about football, the tweet had just been done. So the reporter, it wasn't like it happened months ago. It just happened. So the reporter asked him about it. I don't know. You can debate whether that question should even have been asked. But what Del Rio should have said was, you know what, guys, I'm not going to go there. I'm here to talk about defense and the Washington Commanders, and that's all I'm going to talk about today. Instead, he went the other route, which was he doubled down on it. He like you said, he called January 6th a dust-up.
A dust-up. That just cracked me up. Like, oh my God.
That false equivalency again between January 6th and anything else that wasn't January 6th. And so what happened was he got into hot water, of course. The head coach, to his credit, Ron Rivera, fined him. I think it was like $100,000 or something like that. He essentially, Del Rio apologized, but it reminded me of like when the father drags his son by the ear and makes him apologize to their neighbor for throwing the ball through the window or something. So he has this apology, which you can debate the sincerity of it all you want, but he comes out with this apology. He says, I shouldn't have said dust up, blah, blah, blah. But he does say, I still have strong beliefs about this. It was so, and of course the Commanders had to put out a statement. I'm surprised.
And let's not. This is right before the hearings, nationally televised hearings.
Yeah, right. That was right. That was the tweet was about those hearings. So
right.
I'm surprised. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't get fired. To be honest with you, I thought maybe now you could say, well, maybe the Commanders decided to play it a little bit safe, and they did the fine, they did the statement, but it's still. I just don't know what's going through people's minds when I said. I think I tweeted this. I said, for all I know, maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was in a bad mood. No, really. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was in a bad mood. Maybe he grabbed his phone and banged out a tweet in anger. We've all done it. That's fine. I mean, fine. But I mean, that's what happened. But my issue is when you're now confronted with that a day or two later, you're at a football minicamp, and somebody asks you about this tweet now. That's where you should have the mental fortitude to say, I'm not going there. I'm not going to talk about it. You don't have to apologize for it at that juncture. You don't have to try to justify your words. Just don't talk about it. So I'm not going to talk about that, guys. We're here to talk about football. We're here because it was at a football minicamp. It wasn't like they snagged him at some banquet or something. He was in the middle. He was in his shorts and hat and the whistle, the whole 9 yards. All he had to say was, I'm not talking about it.
Yeah.
And now instead he opens his mouth again and doubles down on it essentially. And it just made the whole situation. So it's just you got to have the, Del Rio's been around forever. He should know this by now, especially
And he's kind of known as being a bit of a hothead and
especially in Washington. I mean, that's the capital. So he's representing the team that represents the capital. And so it just was a bad look. Kudos to Ron Rivera for the way he reacted. I really was impressed by that. But Del Rio's my jerk of the week. I just don't know why you even go there. I really don't.
Yeah, and it's a good point you bring up Ron Rivera, who's been a class act, period, in Washington. Going back, you go back to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh my God! But yeah, Del Rio is just a guy. Oh my God! He finds the term meathead. I think is a good way to put him. It's unfortunately that's the scary part. There's more. I'm sure there's a lot more people in sports that feel more like him than. Well, we'll get everybody that listens know our politics already. That's not Del Rio, so we'll just put it that way. So good call on that. As soon as you start talking, like, oh yeah, he's going after Jack Del Rio, that bonehead. All right. My last couple ones have been about live golf, the Saudis and the blood money, and the golfers getting tied up with that. I could still stay with that, considering they had their first match, or I guess you could say tournament this past week, and it was a bit of a failure. And Rory McIlroy is happily calling him out after he won the Canadian Open and all this kind of stuff. But to make it a little more lighthearted, I think I'm going to go with a certain fantasy football argument that is been taking place in the media for how long now? About 3 weeks, involving Tommy Pham, Jack Pedersen, Mike Trout, and how a fantasy team has been run. It ultimately resulted in fans slapping Pedersen over something he did involving the fantasy football league, which dragged Mike Trout into it. We finally learned that Mike Trout was the commissioner of the damn league. It's gotten to the point where Giants players in support of Jock Pedersen wore T-shirts yesterday, Greg, saying, Fantasy Football 101, stashing players on the IR isn't cheating. This has been going on for how long now? And Tommy Pham said something about it again tonight. He's still pissed off about it. And then I think it's come out that the buy-in for this fantasy league was $10,000. So I could see, people being a little. Then again, most of these guys, it seem like they're involved in this fantasy league. $10,000 is like $100 to us. So
right.
Still, there's. I would say this thing. There's 3 things I don't want to hear from a person for the most part: their politics, their religion, and their fantasy team. I could give a crap about your fantasy team. And you see that, you see it on social media all the goddamn time. Well, how is this going to affect my fantasy team? No one cares. I hate that. Or you listen to a sports talk radio show and they call in, who should I start? Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
So, and I will say this, I used to play fantasy sports, we played way back in the day. For us to actually calculate all the numbers, we had to buy the newspaper and read the box scores. And so football, the games would happen Sunday and Monday. We wouldn't have results tallied up till Wednesday. There was that kind of league. That's how that was. And for us, it was big money. I think we were all like $100 in or something like that. And how we solved the problem about being upset is that we forced the person who won the league, he had to throw a giant ass party. And that usually burned up all the money he won.
All the winnings.
The winnings would go to the party. So it kind of kept everybody happy. But I am tired of hearing about what Tommy Pham has to say and Jack Pedersen has to say and Mike Trout has to say and all the bench warmers on the Giants have to say about this damn fantasy football or whatever it was. So my jerk of the week is fantasy football players who have to feel like they always have to be talking about their team and how it affects it. And one of the best things I ever did, Greg, was stop playing fantasy sports because it was affecting how I enjoy watching the game. I was more wrapped up in how my players were doing than the teams I was rooting for were doing. So, so Tommy Pham, I hope with Tommy Pham, whatever he said tonight is the final word on this whole goddamn stupid argument between multi-millionaires. So that's my jerk of the week.
That's funny.
All right. With that, let's get the hell out of here, Greg. Can you get out the thank yous and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. Obviously, thanks to Bob Page. Wonderful time spent with him. And once again, you can follow him on Twitter. His handle is @BobPageSports.
It's the always acerbic Bob Page, as I call him, as I talked to him when he answered the phone. So, and he didn't deny it. He didn't deny it.
That's right. So check him out there. Check me out every week at my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can follow me on Twitter @Greg. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up this stuff every 2 weeks. And thanks to you, Big Al, for making Tuesday nights so gosh darn fun.
Yes, I want to give a thank you to Greg for staying inside this week where he has good Wi-Fi. And we apologize on our last podcast. It was a bit of a struggle because Greg has sat outside before. It's never really been a big issue connection-wise. But for some reason on last week's show, it was a major, major headache. And we didn't really figure out what it was till Greg went inside and he finished the show and he sounded great. So we apologize for that. Thank you, Greg, for giving me a good connection to play with on this episode. If you want to listen to the show, we're always available at all the usual podcasty places: Apple Podcast, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. Any place podcasts can be found. Just search for the Knee Jerks, search for Eno and Big Al. You will find the show. Please subscribe, please like, please comment. As they say, ring that bell and all that fun stuff that the YouTubers like to say. The homepage, thekneejerks.net. That's where you'll find all the show notes. That's where you can directly download the MP3, all the links to the things we talk about. Like I'll have Bob's Twitter there. I'll link to Greg's blog, things like that. That can all be found at thekneejerks.net. Give a shout out to Linda, who is back at work saving lives in the ER. I just want to say hi to Bean, even though I haven't heard it from him at all today. I miss you, Bean. You've been such a good boy. And also, again, say thank you to Bob. It's always fun talking. It's been about a year since we've had him on the show, so we had a lot to catch up on. It's always fun talking to him. So with that, Greg, let's get the hell out of here because we are running over. So until this time, 2 weeks from now, hopefully we'll have more fun things to talk about than bitching about the Tigers. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.